Everyone, welcome back to the All Things Private Practice podcast. I'm your host, Patrick.Casale. I am doing a solo episode today for the first time in a long time. Basically wanting to talk about the doubt yourself, do it anyway experience that I just went through in Italy. I haven't gotten to record this episode yet because very soon after Italy happened, Hurricane Helene happened. And my heart is definitely with all of my community in Asheville and Western North Carolina and all the other areas impacted. And I got into the devastation and destruction on divergent conversations and talked about the neurodivergent experience of surviving the hurricane and what that's looked like since then. So I'm not going to touch on that right now too much, but forever on my thoughts, mind, heart, and yeah, it's been a lot. It's been heavy for sure. So switching gears to Italy. So a lot of you who are listening probably know that I just hosted my first international summit in a medieval village in the middle of Italy called Pitritoli, Italy. Fun to say and confused constantly. And we had 14 speakers, rented an entire medieval Italian village, bussed almost 100 mental health entrepreneurs 4 hours away from Rome airport. And it was a hell of a time. It was a build-up of almost 2 years of planning and stressing and logistics and getting it all figured out. And it was a really awesome experience. There were definitely some bumps in the road, especially with a location like that. And that was to be expected. It was a little hotter than we wanted it to be, which couldn't do anything about, obviously. However, it really was a lot of fun. And it made me reflect on, like I did this timeline exercise during my talk, thinking about my life and experiences and up till now and what led me on this journey. Because back in 2011, I moved out of upstate New York and moved to Asheville, North Carolina. I was kind of running for my life. Some of you have heard me talk about this before, but bad gambling addiction, a bad failed relationship, and I just needed a change. I ended up moving to Asheville because I loved the vibe, the people, the mountains, the arts, the funky, weird energy. And it was just the place that I needed to be, which makes thinking about everything much more challenging. That's happened over the last month. But I ended up moving to Asheville. I ended up kind of fighting through my gambling addiction. And I haven't gambled since June of 2012. And fast forwarding to like getting my master's, going to get a degree in mental health counseling in 2015. I've talked about this a lot, but this is not something I foresaw. Like, I assume I'd get my master's degree, I'd join a community mental health job. That's the end all be all. That's the finish line. I'll securely finish out my career financially and emotionally in said setting. At the time, undiagnosed autistic and undiagnosed ADHD. So a lot of sensory stuff, a lot of masking, a lot of burnout, a lot of not understanding who I am or why I am or how I'm experiencing things. And just kind of chaos, if I'm being honest with you. And community mental health was certainly not for me. A 9-to-5 is certainly not for me. It really never has been. I've always been very entrepreneurial all my life, because I think I've unconsciously or subconsciously realized like my values for autonomy, freedom, flexibility they're really, really high. That's kind of my anchor points. And when you're working for someone else or you're working in a setting that kind of dictates your day, it doesn't work for my sensory system, for my neurotype, for my the way that I like to be creative. And it felt really stifling. Glad I had the experience to some degree. I think it helped me put things in perspective. It also led to taking a risk of starting a private practice back in 2016. And I was petrified. Major imposter syndrome, major self-doubt, major perfectionism. And it's a risk financially, emotionally. People are telling you it's not going to work. People aren't going to find you. They're not going to call you. And grad school did not do us any favors, right? Like, never talked to us about money unless it was like, you don't get into this field to make money and all of the things. And didn't talk to us about establishing a business plan or forming a business entity or paying your taxes. Like, it's really wild how little conversation we have about this stuff as mental health professionals. But again, very happy I did it. And I still remember my exit interview lunch where my program manager was like, "You're going to be back here in 30 days because nobody makes it on their own." And I've always kind of used that as fuel to the fire a little bit, if I'm being honest. And, I'm so happy that I made that decision because that decision, that risk, then led to other risks. I stayed in my private practice from 2016 up until 2020, where I started getting bored and I started experiencing probably some unknown to me at the time, like ADHD burnout. And ultimately, I ended up creating the coaching business, All Things Private Practice. That was another risk because then I was taking an established caseload and stepping away from it to move more into a coaching capacity to do coaching courses, individual coaching, coaching programs, etc. And that was scary as hell because I was like, I just quit my job to start this practice. It's established, it's running, it's well known, it's constantly getting referrals, but I don't want to do it anymore. I don't think I was really meant to be a therapist in a lot of ways because of my energy levels and the way that my sensory system is impacted really easily. Working for myself, having autonomy, having freedom, I just knew like looking at 60-minute increments of time all the time really didn't feel like it was fulfilling or that it was energizing. I really wanted to have more free time to get more big ideas out there and to be more creative. That's really hard when you're bouncing from session to session to session, as so many of you are, and how I was as well. So I started All Things Private Practice back in 2020, but that was horrifying. I was like, who's going to pay me to teach them how to run their businesses when I have no business training and I don't know what I'm doing half of the time? But I think my authenticity and transparency around my shortcomings and struggles has always been attractive to people. So I did not have a problem getting coaching clients at all. Like, I filled my first couple of coaching cohorts by Take the Leap cohorts is what I was calling them back then. And I had no problem filling them for the first 2 years. And, it's just amazing how taking a risk, building on itself is kind of like, it allows you to take another risk with a little bit less fear. I don't think the fear ever goes away. I don't think the imposter syndrome, the self-doubt, the perfectionism ever truly goes away unless, it just doesn't really ever go away unless you have a really big ego and are really confident and sure of yourself, which I am typically not that person. I question every single fucking decision that I've ever made. And ultimately what ends up happening, right, is you take that risk, you do it, and you learn some things along the way. There's some stumbling blocks, there's some issues, there's some things you would do differently, but ultimately it gives you a little more confidence to take the next risk. The next step was to create a Facebook group and a podcast. And I never thought people would be listening to my voice all over the world, nor did I ever think that I would secure podcast sponsorship, people who want to pay me to talk about things. Like, mind-blowing, really. So that risk happens, right? And then I take another risk of, if I had a retreat in Ireland, who would come? And I got like 60 people DMing me like, I would come, tell me where, tell me when, how to sign up. That's great. That's really exhilarating. That really makes my ADHD parts like excited. However, that also means like excitement level from wanting to sign up versus signing up are two different things, right? So ultimately, my autistic side takes over and I deep dive retreat venues in Ireland. I obviously don't want them to be super touristy because that's just not my vibe. And I find this place like an hour and a half from Dublin, and I talk to the venue host, and she's lovely, and the tour guide, and I'm supposed to go out there in 2022 to like explore it and see it and take photos and do the marketing. And of course, we're still going through COVID and the world shuts back down a little bit, including Ireland. And I pivot and I don't go visit at all, but I continue to move towards hosting my first retreat in March of 2022 in Ireland. Fast forward till now, I've now hosted 18 different retreats all over the world, including the Italy Summit. And this March will be my 4th consecutive year hosting the Ireland retreat, and the last year for the Ireland event. Just because I think it's run its course, and I think that my interests are shifting and changing too. I love that area. The relationships I've built with the woman who owns the venue. The tour guide is someone I would consider a good friend. The musicians who come and play for us, I love it all. But being in Ireland in March during St. Patrick's Day takes a lot of energy out of me. And maybe I'll circle back to it in a warmer month in Ireland, which is kind of, who knows when that would actually be. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, is being able to pivot. I'm not saying I'm going to stop doing this forever in Ireland, but I'm definitely going to press pause on it after 2025. And that may circle back in 26 or 27. I have no idea. But ultimately, all of these decisions have led to this event in Italy, right? And ultimately, building confidence along the way, building reputation, building a following, ensuring that it's a little easier to sell things out than it typically would be. So like, there has been a lot that has happened in that time, and there's still the fear, there's still the unknown, there's still like the concern that, is this going to be good enough? Are people going to get value out of it? Are people going to sign up? I remember when we found the venue in Italy, it was like, we're going to try to sell 100 spots. This is probably going to take a year. It ended up taking about 2 weeks because people were so excited about the idea, which was a bit overwhelming. Then you're kind of in that waiting period of like, what do I do until September of 2024? And ultimately, there was a lot to do in between that time. So it wasn't as if there was not stuff to do to get prepared for that. And it just made me realize, like, all of these risks, all of these things, pursuing the things that we are truly passionate about, doubting yourself, but doing it anyway, really moving into that mentality of like, I am going to be scared and I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to acknowledge that I'm going to have self-doubt and perfectionistic tendencies come up and imposter syndrome, and I'm going to acknowledge them. I'm going to understand that they exist for a reason, that it's okay that they exist, but I'm going to pursue my dream, my goal anyway. My goal has always been to help people step out of their comfort zones and to really understand their greatness and their unique qualities and personalities, and to really allow themselves to pursue the things that they're passionate about, opposed to doing the things that you're supposed to do or that you're told you're supposed to do. And I think for me, it's always been about getting that message into the world. So these events have really allowed me to do that. And while I was on stage, I had this like really emotional experience because my dad came to the event in Italy, which was wild. And I could see him in the crowd, and my wife was there, and close friends and colleagues, and everyone was crying during my talk, which I found like fascinating as I was speaking. I definitely was talking about a lot of emotional, heavy stuff, but that's kind of the entrepreneurial journey, right? Being able to give some of yourself to your audience and share your world, talk about the struggles, normalize them even. That's always been a goal of mine for y'all that are listening, is like, let's normalize fear, failure, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, perfectionism, instead of like always looking at them through a negative lens. It's much more about, let's acknowledge that they exist. Let's thank them for protecting us in certain situations. Let's also tell them to like get in the backseat or hit the fucking road, because I would rather acknowledge them, experience them, and continue moving forward or towards my goals, opposed to allowing them to dictate how we move forward and convincing ourselves that we're not good enough, or that we don't have enough to offer, or that people aren't going to like what you have to say. And that doesn't mean that everybody is, right? Like, there's going to be trolls, there's going to be quote unquote haters, there's going to be negative feedback, but that's okay. We can learn from that too. And we don't have to just look at those as like negative experiences. So while on stage, I do this timeline exercise, and I encourage all of you to do it. Zoom out, put some dates in, think about how far you've come to this point today. Maybe you're not exactly where you want to go yet. Let's emphasize yet. Maybe you haven't gotten to that destination that you are working towards, but there's a goal, there's an endpoint, there's a next step for you, or you're pursuing something. For me, it was like leaving grad school, get the mental health job. That felt like a finish line. Starting my private practice felt like a finish line. Starting my coaching business, my podcast, my group practice, everything that I haven't known how to do, hosting retreats and summits. A lot of these things I've kind of gone into having some understanding of like what I wanted out of them, but not necessarily clear understanding of the how this was going to happen. So for me, that's really important, is to build the plane as you fly it and to kind of pivot and adapt and evolve and constantly grow from it. And sometimes you're going to try things that feel really exciting that you're like, that doesn't do it for me anymore. So do that exercise. I encourage you to do it either visually, write it down, create something that you can reference. Or if it's just in your mind, think about a couple of dates. Let's anchor into, like, if you went to graduate school, let's use that as an experience. You were probably nervous. You were probably overwhelmed. You're probably stressed out working a job at the same time, trying to figure out how to survive. You probably didn't think you were going to get through research methods like I didn't, because that class was the worst for me. You probably didn't think you were going to pass the licensing exams. Like, all of this doubt, all of this insecurity, all this struggle. And then you do. You're like, okay, I can do hard things, until the next hard thing or the next unknown or the next thing that puts us out of our comfort zone comes up, and immediately you're like, I don't know how to do anything. And that's a really common experience. So use that timeline and think about things along the way. They could be professional accomplishments, personal, they could be really memorable experiences, but really anchoring into that. And then I anchor into that, right? I'm standing on that stage and I'm thinking already, like, damn, this is powerful. I never in a million years thought I could say that I'm an autistic ADHD human who just rented an entire medieval village in Italy and co-hosted a very successful mental health entrepreneurial summit. Then I started thinking about next year, right? Because I want to look ahead a little bit. I don't want to live in the future, because I tend to do that and trying to be better about it. But what I do want to do is acknowledge, like, future planning. And I think about 2025. And I think about, damn, I just landed a fucking TED Talk in February in Colorado talking about late in life autism discovery and diagnosis. Never in a million years do I think that that's going to happen, that I can say I am a TEDx speaker. I'm also working on a book deal with an agent that I've procured about a book about the autistic ADHD experience. And I never thought a million years that that would be something I would be doing in 2025. I've got retreats lined up. And for those of you who have been following my journey, I did agree and say publicly many times that I'm only going to host events or say yes to opportunities in odd-numbered months. And I have stuck to that. I'm very proud of myself, because usually ADHD takes over. I say yes to all the opportunities that I think I should say yes to. Some of it's people-pleasing as well. And that also is a quick recipe for autistic burnout, which I've been in for probably years now. And in reality, saying yes to things in odd number months has allowed me to really restructure my year. So I know next year that I'm hosting a retreat in Belize in January with 𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁 doing Spain, creating alternative streams of income. In July, I'm doing Scotland, which is the second Doubt Yourself, Do It Anyway summit. In September, I'm doing Spain and Greece simultaneously. And that's going to be it for me. My TED Talk as well. And I'm going to stick to that. And I encourage all of you to find your energy in terms of what makes sense for you in projecting, in scheduling, in future planning. Take that deep dive and zoom out a bit so that you don't say yes to everything and put yourself in a position like I was this year where I did 6 retreats in 6 months in 6 different countries. Never again. I will never allow myself to do that again. It's always fascinating when you do stuff like that to yourself and you're like, I am the one who creates my schedule. Fuck. I used to do that in private practice too, right? You can probably relate where you schedule people back to back to back. I have 8 people today, 8 people tomorrow. And then you're like, this is terrible. This does not work for me, but I'm the one who's doing it to myself. So I just encourage you to get more clarity about that. Now, with the doubt yourself, do it anyway mentality, again, it is all about acknowledging the doubt, acknowledging the self-doubt, welcoming it, appreciating it, thanking it for being there, for existing, and then telling it to hit the road. I can continuously doubt myself. I'm going to doubt myself the entire way to my TED Talk until it's over. The talk is on February 22nd. Until that talk comes to a conclusion, there is going to be massive self-doubt. However, I know that I am really passionate about what I'm talking about. And I know that even if it is absolutely terrible at the end of the day, the world is still going to keep spinning. So I have to keep that in mind. So I'm going to doubt myself the entire time to that experience, and I'm going to do it anyway. And I want to encourage you all to embrace that mentality. I never thought I'd be talking about TED Talks, keynote speaking engagements. I just did my first one last year in Alaska. A book, sold out retreats, sold out summits, podcast sponsorships, group practice. Like, I didn't think I would ever talk about this stuff, especially not during gambling addiction days, especially not during the build up to getting a master's, and all the struggle and stress and overwhelm and burnout and all the shit in between. But it starts with one action. It starts with one decision to take that one risk. So if you're thinking, wow, that sounds like a lot of stuff, I'd love to get there one day, but I don't think I can. I was definitely in that position of, I don't think I can. I didn't want to start all things private practice because other people were coaches who helped people start their practices, right? Like, it's almost as if this idea is better suited for everybody else but me, or somebody else will do it better. The reality is, like, a lot of these ideas are not that unique. Not many of us are creating like these unique, profound statements or ideas. We're adding our voice, our perspective, our experiences, our takes. That's really the stuff that people gravitate towards and separates you from the other person who's doing the same thing, or the other 100,000 people doing the same thing. So I just want you all to really try to embrace that. And as you go through these careers and entrepreneurial paths, I think it's really important to do that timeline exercise to check in with yourself. Are these things still really things that I value? Are these things still suited for my life and my lifestyle that I want to live? Is this still serving its purpose? You are allowed to edit, adapt, pivot, grow, fall on your face, get back up and do it again. So this stuff is not binary. It's not linear by any means. People ask me, like, do you think you'll do retreats for the rest of your life? And I'm like, hell no. I don't even know if I'll do it in 2026. I have 6 planned for 2025. Who knows what happens after that? I can't think that way because that's just not how my brain works. And it's not comfortable to live like that, where I feel beholden to the next 4 or 5 years of my life. If you ask me what my 5-year goal is, I would just laugh and walk away. Like, that's the worst interview question of all time. Where do you see yourself from 5 years from now? I don't know, not fucking here. But if you are a planner and you do need that, then that's also okay. And that's kind of a part of this too, right? Is our journeys are kind of the same, but also they are unique and they are individualized. So give yourself some permission to make your story your own, to give yourself permission to make your journey your own. And I think that's really important as well. I really want y'all to check in with me about these timeline exercises and tag me on a social media post and let me know if you've done it. Let me know about where you've started it to where you've been and everything in between, because I find it super fascinating. And it's also collectively powerful to see more and more of us talk about all of these experiences, all of the struggle, all of the self-doubt, but all of the risk, all of the reward, all of the good stuff that's come with it too. And I wouldn't change this entrepreneurial journey for the world. I can never sit in a desk job or a salaried position in one location doing the same thing over and over and over again. The monotony is just not good for my mental health. So acknowledging that our brains are all different, our preferences are all different, our needs are all different, and that's okay. So I really encourage you to do this timeline exercise, to think about some of this stuff. Western North Carolina, Asheville, I love y'all. Coming back home next week after being gone for a few weeks, and we're just going to continue to rebuild and recover together as a community. So I just wanted to say that and name that too. And if everything I've talked about today resonates, if you're feeling really inspired or you're feeling excited or you're feeling like I need to know how, just make sure that you are at Scotland next year in July. We still have spots for the Doubt Yourself, Do It Anyway Summit in Edinburgh, July 14th to the 18th. I really want you to think about coming. It's only $1,500. It's MBCC approved for 12 MBCC CEs. We have 13 incredible speakers, myself being one of them. And Edinburgh is just a majestic, beautiful, medieval city in the middle of Scotland. It's freaking beautiful. The accents are amazing. And you can get out into the highlands. You can bop around Europe from there. So really consider checking that out. And my links are in the show notes, as well as all of my social media and my website. My website, again, allthingspractice.com. And you can check out that opportunity. We also have opportunities for the Greece Leadership Retreat in Hania on the island of Crete, September 6th to the 11th, 2025. So there are still opportunities for that as well. And those are all in the show notes on my website and my social media. To everyone listening to the All Things Private Practice podcast, new episodes are out on Saturdays on all major platforms and YouTube. Make sure to like, download, subscribe, and share. If you don't listen to Divergent Conversations, my other podcast that I co-host with Dr. Megan Ness, make sure to check that out as well. New episodes out on Fridays on all major platforms. I'm starting to stumble over my words, which means I can no longer continue talking. And I will see y'all next week. Doubt yourself. Do it anyway.